Welcome back to PsyberSpace, the podcast where we dive deep into the intersection of psychology, culture, media, and technology. I'm your host, Leslie Poston, and today we're tackling a topic that's been making headlines and causing anxiety for parents everywhere: the impact of social media on our children. You've probably heard the dire warnings. Social media is rotting our kids' brains, destroying their attention spans, and fueling a mental health crisis. But what if I told you that much of what you've heard is based on misconceptions and overblown fears? Today, we're going to explore the latest research that challenges the dominant media narrative about social media's harmful effects. We'll look at why social media often becomes a scapegoat for broader societal issues, examine the potential benefits of these platforms for young people, and discuss how we can foster a more nuanced and productive conversation about kids and technology. Let's start by addressing some of the most common beliefs about social media's negative impacts on children and adolescents. We've all heard claims that excessive screen time leads to depression, anxiety, and poor social skills. However, recent research paints a much more complex picture. One study, published by Orban et al. In the journal Nature Human Behavior, analyzed data from over 350,000 adolescents in the United States and the United Kingdom. The researchers found that the association between digital technology use and adolescent well-being is negative but small, explaining at most 0.4% of the variation in well-being. To put this in perspective, regularly eating breakfast or getting enough sleep had a much larger positive association with well-being than stopping social media. Another meta-analysis, published in the Journal of Computer-Mediated Communication, examined 226 studies on social media use and various measures of well-being. The researchers concluded that the overall effect was tiny, about 0.1% of a standard deviation. In other words, any negative impact was so small as to be practically meaningless in real-world terms. But what about the studies that do show negative effects? We must remember that correlation does not equal causation. Many studies linking social media use to poor mental health outcomes fail to account for reverse causality, the possibility that teens who are already struggling with mental health issues in their offline life may turn to social media more frequently as a coping mechanism. A 2021 study by Jensen et al. In the journal Clinical Psychological Science used experience sampling methods to track teens' digital technology use and mental health symptoms. They found little evidence of longitudinal or daily linkages between young adolescents' digital technology use and mental health symptoms. In fact, for some teens, social media use was associated with feeling more socially connected. It's also worth noting that many early studies on this topic had significant methodological flaws. They often relied on self-reported screen time, which people are notoriously bad at estimating accurately, and used cross-sectional designs that can't establish causal relationships. More recent, rigorous studies using objective measures of digital technology use and longitudinal designs have generally found much smaller negative effects. Now that we've looked at what the research actually says, you might be wondering, if social media isn't as harmful as we've been led to believe, why does this narrative persist? Let's think of social media as a scapegoat. Part of the answer in why this narrative persists lies in our brain's tendency to seek out overly simple explanations for complex problems. It's much easier to blame Instagram or TikTok for your teen's anxiety than to grapple with systemic issues like income inequality, academic pressure, or a lack of mental health resources in your location. Social media becomes a convenient scapegoat for this range of societal ills. This isn't a new phenomenon. Throughout history, new technologies have often been met with moral panics about their effects on young people. In the 1950s, comics were blamed for juvenile delinquency. In the 1980s, parents and media blamed video games for causing violence. Now, it's social media being blamed for destroying our children's mental health. These moral panics tend to follow a predictable pattern. Anecdotal evidence is amplified by media coverage, leading to public outcry and calls for regulation, often before rigorous research can be conducted. There's also a generational aspect to consider. For many parents and policymakers, social media feels foreign and sometimes frightening. It's easy to fear what we don't understand and harder to see the potential benefits of a technology that wasn't part of our own childhood formative experience. Focusing on social media as the problem can also be a way of avoiding more difficult conversations about parenting in a digital age. It's simpler to set time limits on device use than to actively engage with and guide our children's online experiences. While it's easy to blame social media for various issues, there is a darker side to this narrative that we must address. How are these fears about social media being used in ways that could actually harm the very people they claim to protect? These fears about social media's impact on children are being weaponized to justify increased surveillance and control of everyone's online activities, not just children and teens. In a previous episode on the weaponization of phrases like "for the children" for proposed laws such as the Kids Online Safety Act, or KOSA, we discussed how well-intentioned legislation can have unintended consequences that disproportionately affect marginalized communities. These same dynamics are at play in the broader conversation about kids and social media. When we frame social media primarily as a threat to children, we create a rationale for invasive monitoring and restrictions that can limit all people's privacy, autonomy, and access to important resources. This is particularly concerning for LGBTQ and neurodiverse youth, and adults, frankly, who often rely on online communities for support and information that they cannot access safely in their offline lives. Furthermore, the focus on restricting access to social media platforms can distract from more pressing issues affecting children's well-being, such as poverty, lack of access to mental health care, or educational inequities. By fixating on screen time, we risk overlooking these systemic problems that have a far greater impact on children's lives. Now that we've addressed some of the myths and misconceptions, let's talk about the potential benefits of social media for children and adolescents. While it's important not to overstate these benefits, the research suggests that social media can play a positive role in many young people's lives when used thoughtfully. First, social media can be a powerful tool for connection and social support, providing a sense of belonging and psychological safety. A study published in the Journal of Youth and Adolescence found that online communication was associated with increased closeness to friends, which in turn predicted lower depression. This is particularly important for young people who may feel isolated in their offline lives, such as those with chronic illnesses or people living in rural areas. Another study by Ulz et al., published in Pediatrics, highlighted various benefits of social media for adolescents, including enhanced communication, opportunities for social connection, and access to vital health information. As early as 2007, a study by Ellison et al., published in the Journal of Computer-Mediated Communication, found that use of social network sites like Facebook was associated with increased social capital among college students. Social media platforms can also provide valuable opportunities for self-expression and identity exploration. One 2019 study found that adolescents used social media to experiment with different aspects of their identity in a relatively low-stakes environment. This can be particularly beneficial for marginalized youth who may not feel safe expressing certain aspects of their identity in their offline communities or at home. From an educational perspective, social media can be a rich source of information and a platform for collaborative learning. Many young people use platforms like YouTube for informal learning, accessing tutorials and educational content on a wide range of topics. Social media can also facilitate peer-to-peer learning and provide access and diverse perspectives from around the world. Digital literacy is another key benefit. Navigating social media requires skills that are increasingly important in the modern world, such as critical thinking, media literacy, and online communication etiquette. By engaging with these platforms under appropriate guidance, young people can develop these essential 21st century skills. Finally, social media can be a powerful tool for civic engagement and social change. We've seen numerous examples of young activists using social media to organize movements, raise awareness about important issues, raise money for important causes, and make their voices heard on a global stage. Given what we've discussed, how should parents approach their children's social media use? The key is to move away from a fear-based, restrictive approach and towards one that emphasizes open communication, parental guidance, psychological safety, and empowerment of your children. Instead of focusing solely on limiting screen time, parents could strive to be actively involved in their children's digital lives. This means having ongoing conversations about their online experiences, both positive and negative. It means helping your children develop critical thinking skills to navigate online information and interactions. And it means modeling healthy digital habits ourselves. It's also vital for parents to recognize that social media use isn't inherently good or bad. Social media is a tool, and its impact depends on how it's used. Some research suggests that active social media use, such as posting, commenting, and interacting, tends to be more beneficial than passive consumption. Weinstein's 2017 study in psychological science suggested that moderate use of digital technology is not intrinsically harmful and may be advantageous in our connected world. Parents can encourage their children to engage more actively and mindfully with these platforms. Privacy and safety are obviously important concerns. Parents can help their children understand the potential risks of sharing personal information online and guide them in using privacy settings effectively. However, this should be done in a way that respects children's growing need for autonomy and privacy. Finally, it's important for parents to stay informed about the platforms their children are using. This doesn't mean parents need to become TikTok stars themselves or understand how Facebook was built, but having a basic understanding of how the different platforms each work can help in having more productive conversations and in setting appropriate boundaries for your children. When discussing children's social media use, there's often an implicit assumption that all parents are safe, well-intentioned guardians. However, this rosy view ignores a harsher reality. For many children, home is not a safe space. We must address how social media can also be a lifeline for these vulnerable young people. According to one study by the National Children's Alliance, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys are abused in the U.S. each year. This abuse takes many forms: neglect, physical violence, sexual assault, and emotional abuse. For these children, social media isn't just a pastime. It's an essential tool for survival and, in some cases, escape or rescue. Social media platforms provide abused children with access to information, support networks, and potential avenues for help that they might not have in their offline lives. For instance, a study published in the Journal of Medical Internet Research in 2021 found that social media was a key resource for adolescents seeking information about mental health and abuse, especially among those who felt unable to discuss these issues with the adults in their lives. Additionally, for LGBTQ+ youth in unsupportive or actively hostile home environments, social media can be a lifeline. The Trevor Project's 2021 National Survey on LGBTQ youth mental health found that 42% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year, with rates even higher for transgender and non-binary youth. For these young people, online communities can provide much-needed affirmation, psychological and material support, and resources that they may not have access to offline. It's also important to address the issue of religious extremism and cult-like environments. Social media can provide children in these situations with exposure to diverse viewpoints and information that challenges harmful ideologies. While this can be a double-edged sword, for many it offers a path to critical thinking and an eventual escape from oppressive belief systems. In cases of parental kidnapping, which affects over 200,000 children in the U.S. each year, including repeat kidnappings of the same child or children by non-custodial parents, social media can be necessary as a tool for maintaining connections with the left-behind parent and potentially alerting authorities. Given these realities, blanket restrictions on children's social media use can be actively harmful. Instead, we need to focus on creating safe online spaces, improving reporting and support mechanisms on social platforms to help prevent radicalization pipelines from forming, and educating children about online safety and available resources. Speaking of challenges that young people face, let's address another important issue, that of bullying. When discussing online bullying, we need to understand that it's often an extension of offline behavior rather than a phenomenon unique to social media. Research consistently shows that most cyberbullying is carried out by peers known to the victim from their offline lives, and typically schoolmates. One 2022 study by Lee et al. Found that at least 1/3 of students who were cyberbullied had also experienced traditional bullying. This suggests that online platforms are not creating new bullies, but rather providing additional venues for existing bullying behaviors. However, it's important to note that social media can amplify the effects of bullying by expanding its reach and persistence. A hurtful comment or an embarrassing photo can spread quickly and remain accessible indefinitely, potentially increasing the emotional impact on the victim. This particular problem is a growing concern in the new era of AI amplification online and offline. At the same time, social media also provides unique opportunities for intervention and support. Many platforms have developed robust reporting systems and anti-bullying features. Plus, the public nature of many online interactions means that bystanders, both peers and adults, have more opportunities to witness and intervene in bullying situations. Interestingly, some research suggests that social media can actually help mitigate the effects of bullying for some youth. A 2018 study found that for adolescents experiencing face-to-face victimization, using social media to connect with friends was associated with decreased anxiety and depression. This highlights the complex role that social media plays in young people's social lives. While it can be a tool for harassment, it can also be a source of support, validation, and connection for those facing offline challenges. Rather than demonizing social media as the cause of bullying, we must address the root causes of aggressive behavior in young people. This means focusing on comprehensive anti-bullying programs in schools, promoting empathy and digital citizenship, and providing support for both victims and perpetrators of bullying. While we've touched on some of the risks young people face online, there is a particularly vulnerable group we need to discuss: at-risk youth who may be susceptible to online exploitation. Certainly, social media can be a lifeline for young people in unsafe home environments. It's essential to address the potential vulnerabilities that come with seeking help online. The intersection of limerence, the state of being infatuated or obsessed with another person, inexperience, and the need for support can create a perfect storm that puts already at-risk youth in danger of online grooming and exploitation. Research from the Internet Watch Foundation found that in 2020, 68% of child sexual abuse material was self-generated, often as a result of online grooming. This statistic underscores the importance of understanding and addressing the complex dynamics at play online. For young people experiencing limerence, which is particularly intense during adolescence, the desire for connection and validation can override caution. When this is combined with the desperation that comes from living in an unsafe home environment, the risk of falling prey to online predators increases significantly. However, we must note that the existence of these risks does not negate the overall benefits of social media for at-risk youth. Instead, it highlights the need for targeted education and support. Platforms like Instagram and TikTok have implemented features to protect younger users, such as making accounts private by default for users under 18. But technology alone can't solve this complex issue. We need comprehensive digital literacy programs that go beyond simple stranger danger warnings to help young people understand the nuances of online relationships and recognize the signs of grooming. We also need to create more safe spaces online where vulnerable youth can seek help without putting themselves at risk. This could include monitored forums, verified support groups, and easy access to professional help resources. It's also important to recognize that many young people turn to online communities because they feel they have nowhere else to go. This underscores the need for broader societal changes, like building better support systems for at-risk youth, improving access to mental health resources even in rural areas, and establishing more effective interventions in abusive home situations. By acknowledging and addressing these vulnerabilities, we can work towards a digital landscape that maintains the critical lifeline that social media provides for many at-risk youth, while better protecting them from potential exploitation. Now that we've explored the complex realities of social media's impact on young people, including both its benefits and risks, let's consider how this more nuanced understanding of social media's impact should inform policy decisions, especially in light of the complex realities faced by vulnerable youth. First and foremost, we must move away from one-size-fits-all approaches like COSA. Blanket restrictions on social media use for all children below a certain age and, effectively, all adults as well, not only ignore the potential benefits but can actively harm vulnerable youth who rely on these platforms for support and resources. Such policies fail to account for the varying needs of different young people, particularly those in unsafe home environments. Instead, policies should focus on enhancing comprehensive digital literacy education in schools, and this education needs to go beyond basic online safety and include critical thinking skills, understanding of online relationships, recognition of grooming tactics, and knowledge of available resources for help. By equipping young people with these essential skills, we empower them to navigate online spaces more safely and critically. We also need to address the underlying issues that can make social media use problematic for some young people. This means investing in accessible mental health resources both online and offline. It involves creating better support systems for at-risk youth, including improved mechanisms for identifying and intervening in abusive home situations. Addressing cyberbullying requires a holistic approach that recognizes its roots in offline behavior and in school environments. When it comes to platform design, we should encourage innovations that promote safety and support, especially for vulnerable users. This could include improved reporting systems, easier access to help resources, or features that facilitate connections with verified support groups or counselors. At the same time, we should continue to promote designs that encourage mindful and intentional use and protect personal information and privacy, giving users more control over their experience and helping them build healthy digital habits. Policymakers need to work closely with social media experts to develop nuanced, effective safeguards that protect vulnerable youth without cutting off their access to vital support networks. This might involve enhanced privacy settings for minors and better systems for detecting and preventing online grooming. We also need to consider policies that address the broader societal issues that push vulnerable youth to seek help online in the first place. This includes improving access to mental health care and implementing more effective anti-bullying programs in schools. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, we need to ensure that young people's voices, especially those of vulnerable and marginalized youth, are being included in these policy discussions. They are the experts in their own online experiences, and their youthful perspectives are necessary for developing effective and fair policies. This could involve creating youth advisory boards for policymakers, conducting extensive surveys of young social media users, and including youth representatives in relevant legislative hearings. By taking this nuanced, inclusive approach to policymaking, we can work towards a digital landscape that maintains the psychological and societal benefits of social media for youth while better protecting them from potential harm. As we've explored today, the relationship between social media and children's well-being is far more complex than sensationalist headlines would have us believe. While there are certainly challenges to navigate, the research suggests that social media is not the boogeyman it's often made out to be. By moving beyond fear-based narratives and towards a more nuanced understanding, we can better support young people in harnessing the benefits of these powerful tools while mitigating potential risks. This requires doing ongoing research, thoughtful policymaking, and most importantly, an open and honest dialogue between parents, educators, policymakers, and young people themselves. I hope this episode has given you a fresh perspective on this important issue. As always, I encourage you to dig deeper, ask questions, and keep the conversation going. Until next time, this is Leslie Poston, your host, signing off from cyberspace. Stay curious.